All right. Hi, everybody. How we doing today? All right. I hope everybody's having a great day and a great holiday season. My name's Bill Jackson, of course. A lot of you know me. Several of you have probably worked with me before. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about data and terms. The reason I'd like to start off with that is to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page. It really helps when we communicate with our end users to make sure that we're calling things the same thing, and it just helps get better service for you. We're going to go into PubWorks basics. We're going to look at the basics of PubWorks. We're going to also look at locations and location features. I get a lot of questions about these and what the difference is, especially from the newer clients. We're also going to dive into some of the system settings. We'll talk a little bit about category data, what you actually use it for and why you have it. And then we'll dive into some more user power options, and then finally a little bit of reporting. And like I said, if we've got a little bit more time left over, we're going to dive into some more of the more advanced options in the program. So let's just take a minute and talk about data and terms for a minute here. So we have locations and location features in PubWorks. Now, locations, that's a pretty easy one. That's some place that you do work. What you're going to do at a location is, of course, the work or the task, but the location itself can be anything from, possibly a street or a building or maybe a park or something like that. And so locations are pretty easy, but I get a lot of questions about location features. How do we use them? What are they really for? Well, location features are basically anything that is at a particular location. I like to use signs, for example. So a street sign, for example, is usually attached to a road. And so that road is the location, and so that street sign would be a location feature. Another example of that would be possibly a building. If you're at like a water treatment plant or something like that, you may have an outbuilding or something like that as well, or any of the pumps. Well, your location would be that particular location where you're working at, whether it be, a water reclamation center, anything like that. And again, your features would be things that are there. So you would have like, your pumps and your transfer pumps and stuff like that. So again, those are the difference between your locations and your location features. Now, another question I get a lot is service requests versus activities. So although I'm not going to be showing you the service request module today, I just want to put a bug in your ear that a service request is exactly that. It's a request to have something done. The nice thing about that is the maybe an outside entity or an individual from the location has called in and said, hey, I've got a problem, like I've got a pothole or something in front of my house. So that's a service request. Well, the way I look at it is activities help you solve your service requests. And the activities is basically the work that is done to solve a problem, is how I see it. And so the nice thing about it is somebody calls in and says, hey, we've got a pothole over here. Well, you would fill out either a daily or a crew activity to solve that service request. So if somebody calls for some demand maintenance, then you go out and you take care of it, and you would use either a daily or a crew activity to solve that problem. Next, I want to talk a little bit about tasks and task types. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, as I've noticed a lot of our clients, as I help them from day to day, I noticed that a little bit of their reporting could be made easier if they were to use types for stuff. So consider a type as an umbrella, and then everything else underneath it would be the additional tasks. So you'd have your task types up above you, and then your tasks would be underneath that. So what do I mean by that? So let's say we have a task type called electrical. Okay, now electrical makes sense because it's very generic, or very, I like to use the word bland. But electrical, and underneath it, you could have things like electric outlet replacement. Um, maybe something like a new box has been added to the side of the building or something like that, or perhaps maybe a new meter has been installed. Those are all of the type electrical. So what you would be able to do is run a report not only on each one of those individual tasks that you would be running, but you could run a report on a task type called electrical and find out everything you've spent on electrical repairs throughout the year or the time period that you are actually interested in. So types are hugely, hugely important in our program, and I highly recommend that you use them any chance that you get. Now, contractors and vendors. I get this question a lot. So what's the difference? So I've got a contractor vendor, what's the difference? Well, contractors are they're going to be entities that are actually going to do work for you. You may have one that's a contractor and a vendor, or you may have one that's just a contractor or one that's just a vendor. So of course your vendors are where you're getting your stuff from, your materials and stuff like that. Your vendors, when you're recording work in a daily or crew activity, you don't necessarily want your vendors showing up in the list. You just want the contractors that are actually going to do some work for you in that list. So it gives us a way to separate the vendors from the contractors, even though they go in the same screen, so to speak, when you're adding them. You just got to be careful to look down at the bottom and pay attention to how you assign the contractor or the vendor. So keep that in the back of your mind, because that's going to pay off for you huge in the future. What we're going to do is we're going to pop out, we're going to look at daily and crew activities. And we're going to kind of look at using the projects as a bucket. And what do I mean by projects as a bucket? Well, projects in PubWorks are hugely, hugely powerful. They can give you reporting opportunities that you would not normally have. For example, say you have a FEMA event, and during that FEMA event, perhaps you have 3 roads that got washed out during that FEMA event. Well, again, by using a project type, you can have a project type called FEMA, and then you could have individual projects for each one of those locations. So if you have 3 roads that were damaged, each road could have its own project. Why is that important? Well, one is that'll provide the opportunity for you to be able to run a report, not only as on a project basis for each one of those locations, but then you can run a project type report, and that will allow you to run a report with all 3 of those projects in the same report, and so you get the costing for all 3 of those areas at the same time. Makes a huge difference, and can really save you a lot of time later, as opposed to trying to chase down separate reports. We're going to talk a little bit about using contractors. And then something that I always get a lot of is how do I get help? Well, Pete kind of covered the ways that you can get help in the program. And one thing that I just want to make you all aware of is we have an outstanding website. And the outstanding website that Ellen, our marketing manager, had created for us not only holds the how-to videos and the webinars, but also our tooltips as well, and any up-and-coming stuff or anything that you need to know about. And so I highly recommend everybody go ahead and use that if they have the opportunity, or at least pop into that website and take a look at it. So we're going to take a look real quick, and we're going to kind of take a peek and look at a few things. And I want to show you first on how we're going to deal with a daily or crew activity, and where you see the contractors, and then I'm going to show you where the bucket is for the projects. And I'm kind of going to go over this real lightly at first, because we'll dig down more as we go on. So let's take a peek at this. So over here, I've got the PubWorks program is up and running. And so let's look at first a daily and a crew activity. So a daily activity, all right, and a crew activity. Now, they look very similar. The idea is we try to keep the continuity between the screens and the top button bar so that, you know, if you can run one screen, you can run the other. The majority of our clients will use the daily activities, but we've also got lots of clients that use the crew activities as well. And the reporting is exactly the same. So anything that you do in a crew activity or a daily activity, these will both be, all this information will be available for you in the costing reports. So let me just show you a little bit here. I'm going to close this and close this. And I just want to show you where the project screen is. So under PubWorks data, we have projects. And so the projects are a very nice, like I was talking about, a fantastic way to consider this as a basically a container to put stuff into. And the nice thing about having a project is that it gives you that reporting, so you get everything all at once, whatever you spent during that project, as opposed to having to chase down individual streets or locations to actually define what you're looking for when you want to pull some costing information out of the program. So projects are hugely useful. I highly recommend that you use them. Now, I'm going to also show you where the contractors and vendors are right here. So these are the contractors and vendors that I was talking about. Now, we're looking right here at this particular one, this contractor, okay? Now, this is saying that it's a service provider and a product vendor. Now, that is quite possible because you may have places that actually do both work for you and provide you know, parts or whatever for your equipment. So it is very possible that you have an entity that is both a service provider or a product vendor. Now, that being said, as we go through them, in this next case that we're looking at here, this particular supply company is a product vendor, but they're not going to be doing any work for us. So basically, these guys, the only time you'd be touching their record would be when you're bringing in new equipment or materials that you bought from them, and if hopefully you're using the ability to add and remove your transaction data by adding inventory through one of the various screens that is available in our program. Now, in our program, you can add inventory using the PO screen, and you can also add inventory just going straight to the material screens themselves. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a minute. But as we keep going through here, you'll notice right here, I've got another person. This is another entity. This is a welding entity, and they're set up just as a service provider and not as a product vendor. And the reason I want to point that out is when you're trying to assign work in a daily or a crew activity to a contractor, they must be set up as a service provider for them to show up in your drop-down list to be able to use them to record any work that they have possibly done for you. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all aware of that, because I get a lot of questions where what they'll do is they'll set up the service provider and the product vendor as well, but half the time they're not a product vendor and half the time they're not a service provider. So if you need any help with this, please don't hesitate to give us a buzz. We'll be happy to spend some time with you and walk through this a little bit and explain it a little bit more for you. But as long as you know the difference between them, this makes your life a little bit easier just when you do a daily or a crew activity, because like, for example, this one being a service provider, I'm just going to show you this. So if we go up to a daily activity, okay, and if we were going to create add, this is where they would show up, is in the contractor field. So this particular contractor here, we'd be looking for 044, and he shows up in there because he's a service provider. And so that makes all the difference in the world. Now, if it was just a product vendor and not a service provider, they would not be available in that drop-down list. So you would not be using them to record any work. So hopefully that helps those of you that have had questions about that. Locations and location feature types. I get a lot of questions about these. And basically, you just got to look at anytime you're working with types, those types are going to be that all-encompassing umbrella above you again. Remember the electrical instance that I was just talking about for an example, where you can have electrical as a task type, and then instead you'd have, like, box installation or running cable or something underneath it. Well, your location and your location feature types are exactly the same way. So just like where I was talking about earlier, where your location may be a street and your location feature type, okay, would be a street. And so that makes it easier for you to find, because then you can look them up in the list under the location feature type, and it makes it really easy to find what you're looking for in the program. The same with the location and location features. Now, the location features are going to be the things that are on the road, and the location would be the road. So as long as you got those down pat, then it's really easy to use the program. What we're going to do is we're going to show you how to add a location or feature, and then also we're going to show you how to add attributes for those, because each one of those locations or location features, you're going to want to track something. And although PubWorks does a really good job at giving you the basis of stuff to track, you may have particular things that you want to look at that we may not be aware of, or maybe there's something of interest that you really want to track, and this will give you the option and the ability to do that. And then also, once you have your attributes set up, then that sets you up so that you can use asset search. Now, asset search is a very powerful tool that they've added fairly recently, within the last couple years. And what it does is basically allows you to find, if you can't find anything anywhere else, you go to asset search and you can usually find it. All right, so we're going to look at our locations and our location features. Now, first, everybody knows right here, we've got our locations and our location features. But where do all these headings come from? What are these and where do they come from? I get so many questions on this. Well, these are actually your types in here. The same with your location feature. These are your location feature types. So where do they actually come from? Well, you go to PubWorks data, you go to category data, and these are all your types right in here. Now, if you are not an administrator in the program, you more than likely do not have access to this, but the administrators would have access. So if you see something that you need as far as the types go and you do not have access to it, I would recommend going to the go-to person where you work and ask them to add the types if you need to add additional types to the list. Now, let me just show you the difference here. So I'm going to pick up location types here. I'm going to drop this down. And if we go up here to PubWorks data and we go to locations, notice that all these in this list are the same as in the list down here, down at the bottom. So this is where your types are coming from. And then this is how you can get them set up so that they're easy for you to find. Like in this case, we have stormwater ponds, we have electric poles, we have facilities, stuff like that. In this example, facilities can be any building, basically, anywhere that you're working. But the idea I want to show you here is just where this information is coming from, and it's coming from your location types. Now, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to show you the location feature types, which here's the location feature types. You get them at exactly the same place, and that's through the category data. And that again, right here, location features, this is that list. Let me move that over a little farther for you. So we got location features, and you see right at the top, AC. So in this particular database, we have 67 records for an air conditioning unit in the program. Next one down, we've got addresses, we've got air handlers, etc., like that. So basically anything that you want to track. So like boilers, a lot of places have boilers, and so you've got the boilers in here as well. But just so you understand that this is where the types are coming from, are from this screen. And because I get a lot of questions where clients would like to add information for a location feature, but they just can't fit it in one of the categories that's already in there. And that's because they probably don't have it. And so again, you may not have access to this with the category data. And if you don't, make sure you contact the person where you work that handles PubWorks so that they can help you out and either give you the powers to do it or they can add it for you. Now, locations, if you're going to add a location, so here's a location right here. Now I'm going to just hit all locations. When you hit all locations, you get them all. Otherwise, you just get the location type that you filtered down to. And so right here, we're just going to add a location. I'm just going to call it A1 test. And I'm going to call it A1 test. And usually it's better if you capitalize your code so that it's easier to see, because a lot of places, they just like to work the codes. And if it's all capitalized in your location code, it just makes it a little bit easier for you to see. And then you've got the option down here for a location type. Now remember, the location types are hugely important. The more you can use a type, the better. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this down as a facility. So it is now a facility, but you see how over here, when I selected facility, that I had certain attributes show up. And the place that these are defined, now first let me tell you, these are for you guys so that you can record information about what you are interested in. As good as PubWorks is, we never know what you're going to put in here for locations. And so we give you the ability to define each one of these types. And so you've got on this screen, you've got 5 of each type. And then you see you've got a tab button here. And so then you have 5 more of each type. So basically what you have is 10 numeric, 10 text, and 10 list options that are available for you. Now the list options, like here you've got roof, you click on that drop-down box. These are your lists that is under there. So you can pick one of these, like, slate, for example. And does it have a basement? Yes. So right there, that just allows you to customize your records, your data records, for what you are interested in. So I'm just going to save this for right now. And we've got the roof, we've got the basement. So I want to show you where we get those. So I'm going to close the location types just to give us a little more room. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the ability so we can actually add attributes. So here we have asset attributes. Click on that, it opens up our box. And you've got a location and location feature types. So remember our types. Our types are all coming from here, right in here, and location feature types are coming from here. And so that gives us the ability to select one. And since we're looking at facilities over here, let's pull up facilities over here. So we're going to pull up facilities. There it is. There it is. Okay. So as you'll see, you've got parking spaces, floors, roof, and basement. And see how they match over here? So this is how we match them up. And we can go ahead and add additional ones to this record, these location records, if we wish. So for example, we've got, parking spaces, we've got floors. Well, maybe we're interested in something else that's possibly numeric. Now, what do I mean by a numeric attribute? Anything that can be measured with a number. So like if you're going to do a search and you want to search for something that has got, maybe bathrooms. How many bathrooms does this place have? Well, you could put bathrooms in here, and then you could actually have a number of bathrooms and say, well, each one has 5 bathrooms. And then you could do a search in the asset search, and you could look for any facility that has 5 or more bathrooms. And so it just gives you an ability to look through your data a different way and to possibly find what you're looking for quickly. The next one over is text attributes. So over here it says text attributes. So you would be looking for, anything that, maybe what does the door say, or, what type of heater vents are in there, or do you have vents that you need to replace, or something like that. And you can record anything that you want, because these are for you guys to record. Now, I want to mention that it is good that you guys use these, but do be aware that if you were to put parking spaces in there and use it for 4 or 5 years and then decide you're going to change that to something else, like maybe corners of the room or something like that, then all your old data would still have that parking space data in there. So my recommendation is put a lot of thought into these before you use them. And if you were to put one in here, try it out, use it on one record, and decide that you want to change it, that's okay. Go back in there and change it. But just be aware that if you've got 20, 30, 1,000 records, and they've all got the same parking space already added to those records, then if you change that name, then all those old records will still retain the original data. So just keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to add a list attribute, because I always have questions on these. And right here, the roof, remember to the right here where we selected the roof from a list, this is where that list comes from. So you actually put in what you're looking at, and then in the list, you're able to add what exactly it is that you want in the list. So here we've got steel, slate, membrane, and so over here you can see that I had selected slate for the roof type over here on that particular location. So you can add a bunch of these in here if you want. These are like extremely useful, like if you're looking at records for signs. So if you're going to add a bunch of signs into the program, this is perfect place to put like your support type, or maybe the material that you've used, or something like that, where you're going to have multiple selections, like maybe you have D channel or wooden post or something like that that's supporting that particular sign. So this is a perfect place for that. And so this is good stuff in here. If you have any questions, if you're not comfortable with these at all, please don't hesitate. Give us a call at the help desk. We'll jump in. We'll give you a hand with these, and it'll make a lot of sense. We'll spend a few minutes one-on-one with you, and it'll come to you, because it's pretty low stress. Now, asset search. Okay, so we've got this option in here called asset search. Now, I just showed you all those attribute fields. And what we could do is we can look in here, we can look at the facilities. Okay, remember we were just looking at facilities. Well, I can look at the attribute list over here and say, well, what do I want to look at? Well, let's look at how many floors they've got. So were the floors equal, maybe 2? And so let's generate our list. So this is why I was saying this asset search function is so powerful, because you may know something about a location or a location feature, but maybe you can't remember the name or where exactly it was. By using this asset search function, you're able to dig down a little bit into the data, and now we've got a list right here of 9 facilities that have 2 floors in them. The same if you want to go back to 1, we'll go to 1 floor, generate the list, and here's our list that has 1 floor in there. So again, just makes it really easy for you to find your data, and I use this asset search function quite a bit. So I'm going to close the PowerPoint for a minute. Now, settings. Now, we have three main places to look for settings in our program. One of them is in the system settings screen. Now, the system settings screen, of course, has a lot of global settings, but the system settings screen is only available to administrators. So you may not have access to the system settings. And again, if you don't have access to them and you need access, ask your PubWorks, the person that's in charge of PubWorks at your location, and ask them to set you up with it. Or they can just add what you need and take care of it for you. Next is the user powers. So you've got user powers, and as an administrator, you can go in and you can change a lot of stuff. But that being said, there is certain things in user powers that allow you to modify your user powers to give you the experience that you want, to kind of customize the way that you add data into the program. And then finally, there's toggles. Toggles are on and off switches, basically. And there's two toggles that I like to show everybody. And it's basically reduces the amount of stuff that you have to look through is what it does. But we have other settings in there, and toggles basically mean on and off. And I will show you all three of these. And it'll make a little bit more sense to you as soon as you take a look at them. So let's take a look. All right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at, excuse me, we're going to look at the system settings. So under system, there's a system settings heading. Now, like I said, not everybody's going to have access to this. Generally, you have to be an administrator in PubWorks to have access. And if there's something in here that needs to be changed, you need to ask your PubWorks administrator for that. But in your system settings screen, we have some options in here, whether to use overhead allocation parameters. But one of them I like to point out that a lot of people don't know about is this employee rates load factor. So what exactly is that? Well, the employee rates load factor, what that does is gives you the option that, as opposed to going to each individual record for your employees to figure out what their loaded rate is. And what I mean by the loaded rate is your loaded rate is the rate that your employee costs you to actually do work. So you have the base rate, which is what they see on their paycheck. Then you have the loaded rate, which is usually their base rate plus benefits or anything else that's required to keep that employee employed with you. And that's things like your workman's comp insurance or anything else that is attached to that, even personal insurance, stuff like that. So this multiplier, what it does, it gives you the option to set a multiplier in there. And then when you set up your employees, you just set them up with a base rate, and then it'll multiply the base rate by this load factor to give you your regular rate. Now, it's not going to be exact for every single employee. If you've got 50 employees, this can save you a ton of time. But be aware that it's not going to give you an exact to the dollar amount for every single employee, because you may have an administrator whose load factor is, maybe 0.46%, where, another employee's load factor may be 0.43%. So, maybe averaging the two of them together and loading that in there would be a good idea. Now, if you're interested in using this option, please don't hesitate. Give us a buzz. We'll be happy to walk you through it. A lot of places just like to set each individual pay type to a particular dollar amount, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can certainly do that as well. Our program will allow you to do that. Employee dates. So in the employee screen, and let me show you what we're referring to here. So in the employee screen, we've got certain dates over here that it's starting to track these particular dates. Well, that's where these are actually coming from, right here. So label 1, okay, is your birth date right here. And so you can even click on birth date, and you can change that label if you want to whatever you want, and track whatever it is that you want. And these are all date fields. So it makes you have the ability to do a little customization and customize it for the way your entity works. Now, as you can see, we've got all these other fields in here, but back to the employee rates, the load factor here. Okay, to further that discussion, your base pay rate is 40, but because we don't have it set up, my regular rate is also 40. Well, if we had a load factor like 1.42 in here, it would multiply this by 1.42, and that would probably be roughly about $55 roughly for a regular rate. And so then you'd be able to do that quickly on the fly. Just makes it easy for you, but I just wanted to point that out. Back over to the system settings screen, we have our activities screen, and we have our basic warning values, which are here, but we also have the default and special labor types in here as well. And these can be set up, and I don't want to spend much time on these, but basically when you get your program, we usually put a lot of effort into setting these up correctly for you. And if you ever make changes in your pay types and stuff later on down the road, we can certainly help you adjust those as well. Now, we've got reuse values up here as well, but down below, we've got other additional settings that are available. And these, again, these settings are only available to administrators in the program. Now, one of them down here that I like to point out is this crew activity equipment operator mode. Now, if you ever have a FEMA event, I recommend you turn this on. Now, why do I recommend that? It's because what it does, it gives you an extra tab in the crew activities, and it makes sure that each employee has a piece of equipment that they're working with. Because we know how picky some of the government people can be about their FEMA entries, but they want to know who's using what equipment for how long and when. And so by using this crew activity equipment operator mode, this is very, very useful. I'm going to uncheck it for right now and hit apply. And let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to close this. So here's our crew activities right here. So we've got our basic 3 tabs. We have employee, we have equipment, and material. So you've got your basic crew is out doing work, and what you may want to do is you have a FEMA event. Well, you're going to want to make sure that each one of these employees, maybe they're running a certain piece of equipment. Well, we'll close this. We're going to come over here and select crew operator mode. I'm going to hit apply. So now when we come back to our crew activities, you'll notice I now have a new tab right here. This new tab allows me to, I'm going to hit add. It allows me to select a piece of equipment, but then look at this. I also get to say who's running that equipment. And then you can go through the whole list, whoever else is running everything else. And so you'll be able to actually say, so-and-so ran this Bobcat, so-and-so ran the Caterpillar. And so those are assigned to those particular, those hours are assigned to those particular users. So it'll make your life a lot easier when it comes time to doing FEMA reporting. Now, that being said, I actually have clients that use this just the way it is, and they'd rather just have the equipment operator tab left on all the time. Well, you can certainly do that. There is nothing wrong with that. And so if you want to leave it on, just leave it on. So it's right there. You'd click on it, you'd highlight it, you'd hit apply, and you're done. That's all there is to it. The miscellaneous tab. We have the ability for projects to add fringe or overhead. And so you can put your amounts in here by percentages. We've also got in our estimate worksheets here, we have the ability if you want your equipment summaries only, or if you want the entire summaries. Now, something you may not be aware of is PubWorks recently has added the ability to do estimates in the projects. And that is huge because now you can say, well, I know I need 300 man hours and the average employee makes this, and maybe that I want to know what that project may cost me. You can now create an estimate with that, which really, really makes it nice. A couple other things I want to point out to you: the pay period hours. When you're looking at your pay periods, you've got the ability for a whole month with a start and end date, or a 2-week with a start date. Now, this is nice because we have some clients that they have different start dates, and so it accommodates that for them as well. We've also got the ability to show crews and stuff like that over here. And if you need any help with that, please don't hesitate, give us a buzz. We've also got quality assessment is available in the system settings. So this is where you can set your limits for your quality assessments. And quality assessments are available in the location tabs, and they're fairly easy. I recommend using the PACER method. The PACER method just seems to be a little bit easier to use. And if you'd like more information on that, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We'll be happy to jump in there with you and walk you through the use of that. Next thing we're going to look at is the category data. Okay, now I kind of went over the category data a little bit with you, and the category data is basically your data types again. Your data types are big, and so the more you use your types, the better it is. And let me see if I can kind of show you a little bit more about those. So our data types again are in our category data. And so this is where you've got things like your labor types, your location types, your material types. Now, I want to point out material types because this is huge. So you've got brushes, okay, you've got belts, stuff like that. So the way this is lined up, because you've got the material type of belt, anytime you add a brand new like fan belt or any of the other belts that are used, like, you know, for whether it's for vehicles or whether it's for things like HVAC units, stuff like that, if they have the material type belt on them, then you're able to run a report and say, well, what did I spend just on belts this year? And again, it just gives you the opportunity and the ability to do deeper reporting. So anywhere you can use those types, I recommend it. So let me show you here. We have materials right here. And this is what I'm referring to as far as your types, is right here, your material types. Because your material types, you notice anything that's yellow in PubWorks is a required field, but we don't require the material types. Well, I just say anytime you're going to add stuff, go ahead and use those types, because you may not see the benefit for it right now, but in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, you may find this extremely useful, because like I was saying, you could run a report just on the belts and see how much you're spending just on belts. You may have some machines that you're replacing the belt every 6 months, and that particular machine, as far as regular maintenance, should only need a belt every 2 years. So it's another way for you also to determine, you know, if you need new equipment and stuff like that. It just makes it easier for you to look stuff up. The category data, again, is so useful. I recommend using it. You've also got, here's your task types. So task types, again, are very, very useful. So like administrative stuff, anything to do with bookwork, stuff like that. Facilities maintenance. So, you know, you may be doing particular work on a facility. Well, any of the tasks that are given that task type facility, you run that report for the task types and you find out exactly what you spent on facility maintenance. Same thing, like if you're going to use wastewater, water distribution, very useful in cases like that. So now we're going to take a peek at your user powers. Now, we've got a ton of stuff in user powers. And the nice thing about it is Pete kind of sort of looked at them a little bit earlier, and they're broken down pretty much to what we find most of our clients need. Now, that being said, don't worry, if you wind up needing something special, you know, don't hesitate to call. It doesn't hurt to ask. most of the time we can usually accommodate something for you, or maybe we can come up with a different solution for you as well. But in the user powers, the add, modify, delete, that is really huge. And the ability to add, modify, and delete certain things is very useful. But in some cases, you may have somebody that you're assigning work to, and you just don't want them to have the ability to delete something. And so that can stop you from doing, in my words, I would say, doing something unfortunate. Viewing and reporting. Now, viewing and reporting is very useful. We can also turn off the ability for other employees to see the actual hourly cost of an employee. And so then that it's used quite a bit actually. And so I'll kind of walk you through that one. Hiding codes, and we have tab to count. A lot of people don't like the codes because of all the drop downs that we've got, and they just want to use the names. And then other people are really good at the codes. Well, I'm no good at codes, so I prefer just hiding the codes and looking at all the names. And I'll walk through that with you. And then also the custom date range. Now, the custom date range, this is where most people run into a problem when we get a phone call where they say, I did this, I can't find it, I cannot bring it out of the program or run a report on it, or I can't get it to show up. Well, 90% of the time, it's because the custom date range is set too stringently, and you may have to adjust that date range so you can see additional activities. And I'll walk you through that as well. And then also something that Pete had alluded to earlier, which is reuse values. That reuse values option is extremely useful. For an example, maybe you're doing an inspection at like 4 locations. Well, the only thing that would be pretty much different at each one of those locations would be the location itself. Well, by using the reuse last values and having it set up to basically reuse your equipment and reuse your employee and your location and your task, then all you would have to do is go back in and change the task name or not the task, but the location name, and then hit save. And so just another way to speed up your data entry and allow you guys to get more done with your time more efficiently. All right, so what we're going to look at first in the user powers, we've got user powers screen set up here. Now, if you bring up the user powers screen and all this stuff is grayed out, we refer to that as ghosted out. But if it's grayed out, then that means you probably do not have access to a lot of this. And this is the administrative button right here. So if you've got a checkbox in that, it gives you access to everything. If that is unchecked, then that means you'll have to go to somebody else to adjust your user powers for you to get into some of this stuff. But there are a few things that you can adjust on a by user preference, just to kind of customize your own use of the product. So as Pete was showing earlier, you've got the activities where you can add, modify, or you can delete, view, and reporting. So the nice thing about having that split up that way is, yes, you can add, modify, but if you uncheck delete, they can't delete it. And then you can always go back in and check on that employee. Contractor vendors, add, modify, delete. Generally, if you can add them, you can usually delete them. The reason I say that is because a lot of times you may add one in there and then you decide, oh, wow, I spelled it wrong or something. And so then you can pop back in there and take care of that and make that adjustment if necessary. But again, we can customize these user powers for most everybody. And if you need some help with that, please don't hesitate. Give us a buzz. That's what we're here for. So let me show you something with the employees though real quick. So in a daily activity record, for example, okay, we have a particular employee that's saying when the work was done, but you look over here, you've got the hours and you're looking at their pay rate. Well, sometimes maybe you don't want the other employees to see what the other employees are making. So we can come in here, we'll close that. We'll come back down to the viewing. We'll uncheck viewing. We'll hit save. Now, if we go up to a daily activity, look at this, it's all asterisked out. So now they cannot see what the other employees were doing, or the other employees are making, I should say. And so we've got the total for the equipment, we've got the total for the materials, which is great, which allows you to continue to work and make sure you're not making any mistakes. But then the total cost is also blanked out so that the employee can't easily go back in and figure out what the pay rate is. Of course, if employees, if they want to do something, they'll usually be able to figure out a way, but this is how we kind of keep them out of trouble. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on and hit save. And then when I go back to that daily activity, you'll see now we're able to see their rates again. So I encourage you to go ahead and play with the user powers a little bit, especially you administrators, because you can set up a dummy account in here, or just call it a test account, and then just log into that test account, log back out, change the user powers, log back in, and just practice, and that'll give you a good idea of what you want to give each one of your individual employees. Now I'm going to click the miscellaneous tab. Now over here we have a start screen option. Now your start screen option is very, very useful because maybe you just want to start hammering in daily activities or something as soon as you come in and you start PubWorks. Well, this gives you the ability to start the screen up. You'll notice that some of these are ghosted out or grayed out. That's because I do not have those modules activated in the program. But anything that has to do with the core, I could have it bring up those particular screens right away. So it makes it a very useful option. Now, over here in miscellaneous settings, we have some ability to do like override and active closed. Now, sometimes you may be looking at stuff and you'll wonder why you're seeing, inactive closed stuff coming up. Well, 90% of the time it's because this box is checked. And if you just uncheck it and then resave your record, then it'll hide any of the inactive stuff if your toggles are set to hide inactive equipment, stuff like that. So over here, Pete's already kind of showed you the sort order. So when you're doing the sorting on your activities, you would go here. I generally just like them to look at the codes, and I usually take the defaults myself, but it's not going to hurt you to come in here and play with this a little bit and adjust it to the way you like it and the way you want to customize it for your personal use. Now, remember where I was just talking about, it's possible that maybe you went in, you looked at something, you created an activity, you did it, but you can't find it. 90% of the time, it's this right here, the custom date filter. Now, if you've got 3,500 vehicles and maybe 2,700 locations and you're working on stuff, you may want to thin that down a little bit and just look at everything that you've done over the last 90 days. Well, a lot of times I recommend people use the last 90 days in here. And so if you click on that change, it brings up your date filter selection. Well, here I've got it set to the last X days. Well, most places have it set to 90. And so nothing wrong with 90 days, because the majority of the time, if you have gotten a request for something or something needs to be done, most of the time it gets taken care of within 90 days. Sometimes there may be something where you're waiting on parts or something like that, or maybe you just want to go back and look at stuff that was done maybe a year ago. Well, then you can put in here, like what I had before, put 1,000 days in there or whatever you want. You can look at it by the month, or if you click any dates and you leave it blank, it'll show you absolutely everything. And so that's a beautiful option. And this is where most people get hung up, is because they'll do something outside of that date range and they'll forget to come in here and change that. I'm just going to hit save and save that. Now, activities, we've got the ability to hide the codes in here. So in the daily activities screen, of course, all these code fields right here. And then you've got over here, you've got all the code fields as well. Well, if we come in here and we set all, and we hit save, then we can come back in here to that daily activity screen, and you see how all those code fields disappeared? This is a big one because a lot of people really like this option. This is why I'm pointing this out. And then you just have to work with the names, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to clear all, and I'm going to save it again. And then when I go back to the daily activities again, my code fields are back in here again. Some people are just really sharp and they know codes really well. I'm not one of those people. I'm better with reading it. Now we've got this tab 2 option also. This tab 2 option, this again is made for you to increase your speed, and the tab 2 option is another one of those options that's available to you in your user power screen, whether you're an administrator or not. So what does that mean by tab 2? So here's a daily activity screen, okay? And so by having each one of these checked, that's where the cursor is going to stop when you're hitting the tab. The tab 2 count, on the other hand, is how many times it's going to tab through a particular screen. So the tab 2 count being 2 means when it goes through the equipment screen, it's going to tab 1, 2, and then it's going to move on to the material screen. And so if you wanted to go through all 4 of them, you would change that tab 2 count to 4, and then it would go through every single one of those fields. But 2 is usually the best setting for that. And so also the reuse values, here's your ability to reuse the values in that sheet. So if I were to create this daily activity right here, for example, then by creating that daily activity and then hitting add, it would save all this information for me that is checked in here. So like it would save the employee, the date, the project, the equipment, but it wouldn't save the employee hours, and it wouldn't save the location feature, but it would save the task. And you can select all of these and have it copy them all over for you. And this makes it really easy if you're doing a lot of heads down data entry. Gives you a good option. Gives you the ability to just enter your data quickly and efficiently. We got the secondary tab. You have your customizable warning values for yourself as well. You've also got the ability to allow 0 hours for employee hours, but these get grayed out unless you're an administrator. So again, if you're wanting to use 0 hours, talk to your administrator for that. Let me close that. One other thing I just want to show you again is the toggle screen. So in toggles right here, generally when we set up the program for you, we set all these up for you. They're usually good. They can be changed. Just call and ask us if you have any problems, and we'll help you out with these settings. But the top 2 are the ones that I want to point out. They're big, and the top one, exclude inactive records from Windows. So what does that mean? That means when you're doing like a daily activity and you've got equipment that's been deactivated, it won't show up in the list, so you don't have to dig through it. Exclude inactive records from listing reports. So when you create a report that basically lists what you have as far as your equipment goes, it'll hide the equipment that is no longer active in the system that perhaps you either sold or auctioned off. If you uncheck it, it'll show you everything, including all your old stuff that's been deactivated. All right, so I talked a little bit about the warning values, the direct job costing. We've got direct job costing, which will allow you to actually do, add direct job cost items to a daily activity. If you want information on that, please don't hesitate. Give us a call. We'll walk you through that. I've already walked through the options a little bit with you, but I want to pop back and just take a quick look at those again. So in the system set, oh, wrong one, sorry. I go back down to the user powers here. All right, so we've got other options for you in here, okay? But in the, if we go up here and go to system settings, right here, we've got the ability for their warning values. Let me bring that back up. We've got those warning values, which I was talking about earlier. Let me pull this down a little bit in here. And then we've also got what I wanted to show you is purchase orders and GIS export information as well. These are more advanced. If you want to learn how to use those, please don't hesitate. Give us a buzz. We'll walk you through it. There's your project settings again as well. But something I get a lot of questions about right here is the background. Can we change the background? Yes, you can. A lot of places will put their city or county seal in the background so that they're referenced when they look up instead of seeing this background that we have for PubWorks. So I wanted to make sure that you knew about that as well. Let me close that. We've got activities. Okay, in the POs, again, we've got POs, vouchers that you can use, and we've also got funds available in here as well. I like to point these out because the funds are a fantastic way to help keep track of certain things. The POs, if you don't want to use POs, you don't have to use POs, but they are in the system and you can use them. And the thing is the POs, if you use POs to receive your materials, it does affect your inventory levels. So if you receive certain things, it'll increase your inventory levels for you. So just make sure you're aware of that. Second thing is if you go into your materials screen, alternately, you've got the ability to use the add to inventory and your inventory return as well as inventory adjustment. Don't just start typing stuff into the quantity on hand in here, because if you do that, then you lose that transaction of when you added stuff to your inventory. And I highly recommend this because this is great, because then you can see your inventory. Like here, we've got an inventory return where we actually return some inventory, and then we've also added inventory to it as well. So this is an excellent record. I highly recommend that you take advantage of it. And then, of course, in the materials screen, anything that's got that asterisk on it, this is where these materials have actually been used. And if you double click them, it'll bring the work orders up or whatever that you use that material in. So we've got different kinds of reports. We have cost versus listing reports, and we have cost by task versus cost by location reports. We have an M button for our filter, and we have an asset search clipboard. So these are hugely, hugely useful. And let's just pop out and take a quick look at how we use those real quick. And so basically what we're looking at here, bear with me here, the cost, we go to activity cost reports, cost by location, and cost by task. These are the ones you're going to use mostly. Now, although we have, and I ran into this last week, we do have projects, okay, and we do have project reports, but if you're not using a project, you want to use the activity cost by location and activity cost by task reports to get your costing information. The project screen was basically developed so that you could get project information out of that. But this is where you would normally come. And so I'm going to close that so it's not distracting us. But we have options in here. We've got task summaries, we've got labor summaries, but two of them right here, comprehensive detail, comprehensive summary, are some of our most popular reports. Those reports are especially useful when it comes time to running FEMA reports. And what I'm just going to pick up randomly select a place. Let me get the next one down here. Let me try. I'm going to do this. You can also type in, I'm going to go Babbitt Lane right here. And so I've got Babbitt Lane. Well, I can run that report. I can run it by a year. And so I'm going to go back, hit OK. And so here's the information that I ran for that particular location. And then there's all your bottom lines, which is very, very useful. Also, you've got the same thing available for you over here in activity cost by task. And so basically what it does is it outlines it by task for you. And so I'm going to go back to that calendar. I'm going to go back to 2016 and run that. And I should have selected a location, but it gives me everything. But the nice thing about it is it's giving me a bunch of information. It's looking at my labor hours, my labor costs, equipment, material costs, and it gives you a good idea. You go back to your last page. That was a 21-page report, and it gives you your basics right there. Now, if you have any question with reporting, please don't hesitate to holler. Something I want to point out is print legend page. I get a lot of questions about, I ran this report last year and I can't remember how I configured it. Well, this is how you work with it right here. We're going to do admin. I'm going to pick admin for a task. I've got a comprehensive summary. I'm going to do it by the year 2016, and I'm going to run that report. Now, here's the report itself, but behind it is an actual legend page that's telling you this is how I configured the report. So it's saying here's the year, it's saying activity cost, and then any of the other filters that I would use are going to be available in here. I highly recommend this, especially when you're doing year-end reporting, because then in a year when you want to go back and rerun the same report, then you can duplicate the report just with different dates. And then that way you're not comparing apples to oranges. Very, very, very useful. Also, we have the ability to export stuff. So I'm going to come back over to this one. I'm going to run this report. We have the ability, of course, you can print your report, but we have the export options here where we can export it in Adobe PDF. So we can see it in Adobe, but we can also export this in a Microsoft data only or Microsoft Excel sheet. And the nice thing about that is it gives you the ability that you can put this out, you know, maybe you've got a heading or a column that you want to use on the report. You can push this out. You can create your own reports with the data that you export and then just put it all together. But be aware that you can push this out in an Excel spreadsheet as well as other options in there. But that Excel spreadsheet will allow you to manipulate your data just like you normally would. So let me close that, close that, close that. Final thing I want to point out is over in projects. And I know I'm running a little long, guys. I do apologize. Right here, projects. This is really a big deal. So we have these things called snow reports in PubWorks that have came out, and they're very, very useful. And so the way you use the snow reports is you have a project set up, and I've got a snow project in here that I had created earlier. And in that snow report, the nice thing about it is this is all my time and labor and everything that was done. Well, if I run this particular cost report, I open project cost reports. Well, look down here. I have a snow summary report that I can run. So we have to help you set these up because it looks at like 3 particular data types, like types of materials that you're using. And so we can set that up for you. I'm going to go by year. I'm going to go 2017. And I'm going to go ahead and run that. Well, here's the report right here. And the nice thing about it is it's looking at, it's telling me what I spent for sand, what I spent for brine individually, and how many tons I may have used. And it gives you extra information. So it's a very fast way to run a snow summary report. We've also got the snow summary by day. And so we could do that, and you'd pick a particular day. And so if I come up here and pick the 5th and come down here, pick the 5th and then rerun that report, it's giving me the by day what I did on that particular day, where I used 2 gallons of brine and I used $4 in sand, and I didn't use any salt on that. So just really easy ways to get to information. What I'd like to know now is if we've got any questions, and if I can help you answer them real quickly. If not, I can jump out and give you a hand.
Thanks, Bill. I have received a few questions. One is that if I wanted to see what Charlie Brown completed during the week and how many hours he actually worked on each job, what report would I use? It better add up to 40.
Okay, so basically you're looking at Okay, we have these employee cost reports, and one of my favorites is the employee activity audit report. And so you can put in your dates as far as your start date and your end date. And I'm just going to randomly select a couple here. And then you just run that report, and it'll actually come up and show you what they were doing, and it'll show you how many hours that you've worked. And so this is a really good report that I highly recommend to people. It's very useful. You've got other abilities to where you could actually go by the task and you could see what exactly they were doing. So, maybe you're interested in, what did he do just on that particular day if he was mowing places or something like that. And so you could do it by task as well. And also you can do a detail by day report. So you could actually look at each individual day and see what they did over that particular time period as well.
Thank you.
Hope that helps.
Yes, Amanda, thank you for your question. And then another question is, why can't I find an activity? I know it was recorded.
Okay, now this is very, very common question. Activity filter is one place to look. As soon as it comes up, it's usually because this time frame right here is not looking at the time that that particular activity was done. Also, in your user powers, go to your miscellaneous tab, and here's that custom date filter. So 90% of the time, like I was talking earlier, a lot of times we'll have a client that's looking for something that was done, maybe 6 months ago, and they can't get it to come up. Well, 90% of the time, it's usually because of this particular filter. You get that date filter set up to where it just shows you everything, and just by simply clearing it all out, it'll show you all, and then rerun that report, and more than likely you'll be able to see it.
Thank you. Next question, can I enter both overtime and regular time in an activity?
Yes, so in a daily activity, anytime you're adding a brand new activity, we're going to hit add, we're going to pick on David, we're going to say David's at my test location, and we're going to say he's doing admin work. Well, maybe he did 2 hours of admin work, but then, he did 2 hours overtime too. And so you just save that, and you see how it calculates it out for you. So 2 hours at his regular rate and 2 hours at his overtime rate gives you a total right there. So yes, you can do that all in the same activity. I highly recommend it.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Can I hide an inactive equipment from activity drop-down list?
Okay, so we have an activity, so daily activities right here, all right? And so if you go into your toggles, right here, toggles, exclude inactive records from Windows. So if we uncheck that and then we hit apply, all right, then anytime you make a change, I recommend close the windows and then reopen them, and that refreshes the data in there. So if I go to daily activities now and I want to create a new activity and I look through my equipment, not only is my current equipment in here, but my deactivated equipment is in here as well. So, and I'm not sure if there's an easy way to show this to you. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to come back over here, hit exclude inactive records from Windows. I'll hit apply and let it do its thing, go through the grinder here for a minute. And then if we go back to our daily activity now, and then we hit add, and then when we go through here, this list will be shorter because it'll take out all the inactive equipment out of the list so you don't have to dig through it. So it helps you kind of speed up your data entry process.
Thanks, Bill. A question arrived from Libby. When you run a report, you cannot see overtime separate. This is needed for FEMA.
Okay, now basically we do have the ability to come in here for run employee cost reports, and we can do that as well with that activity audit report. That's a good one. Got the employee hours breakdown as well. because sometimes you do have to run a couple different reports for them as well. And so right here, it's showing you your overtime versus your regular time. And so this should help you out as well. And if not, give us a call. We'll walk you through some other options as well.
Thank you. Okay. Using the payroll reports, my engineer's pay rate has to be calculated to the 10,000th decimal. PubWorks only allows to the 100th. Is there somewhere to change this?
Unfortunately, that is a design limitation of the program. Let me show you here. So if I go into employees, okay, and I've got an employee here. We're just going to add a brand new employee. I'm just going to call him employee W here. All right, and we're just going to call him this, and we're going to say he did $10 an hour, okay? But it's going to be 10, and we're going to do 255, so 10.255 per hour, and we hit save. See how it rounds up to 10.26, and that's a limitation with the program itself. I have discussed this with the programmers, and they don't think it's going to be possible to go ahead and add that additional opportunity to add those other entries in there. But this is why you will be limited at that.
Thanks, Bill. What is the M button for? I see it on reports.
All right. So the M button is very cool. So on the reports, when we go into things like the activity cost reports here, now you'll notice that you have an M above several of these drop-down lists. So what does that actually do for you? The M button allows you, the M is short for multiple. So you can do multiple selections. So in this example, like here, as opposed to running it for a single task where you could look at, just one particular task, well, you hit that M button, and the M button gives you the opportunity to do multiple selections. So you could pick as many tasks as you'd like, and you move them from the left-hand screen to the right-hand screen. And so what it'll do is it'll report on these 4 tasks. And so any of the other selections, you can do that on with the M button, and it gives you an opportunity to speed up again your ability to look up your data. Now, that being said, something I do want to make sure that you're aware of, there is an excludes button down at the bottom. If you click that excludes button and you move the ones that you're interested in over to the right hand side, it'll show you everything but those. So it's just an idea that if you want to report on everything else except those, maybe 4 entries, then you'll be able to use that. And so I'm going to uncheck the exclude, and I'm going to hit OK. And you see up here now, it says list selected. And so it's just saying that you've got a list that you're actually using instead of doing a single selection from that drop-down box. Hugely, hugely useful. Just make sure that you don't have that excludes checkbox unless you're wanting to exclude certain information from those reports. And this is where it's very useful if perhaps you don't have your types set up in the program, your data types, like maybe your activity types. So this makes it a little bit easier for you to look those up if you don't have those set up too.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bill. Any last minute questions? And of course, you can always submit them to support@pubworks.com or call the support line 888-920-0380 extension 2. Thanks so much, Bill Jackson.